Hi students, my name's Chris and I'm from the Office of Fair Trading's Buy Smart team. Welcome to today's online learning video presentation. Our topic for today is all about buying your first car, and this has been designed for students in years 10 to 12. Now, whether you're doing this for your schoolwork or if you're actually out there looking to buy your first car, or both, there's going to be some really important and helpful information in here. For students who are in younger grades and planning ahead, you're absolutely welcome to follow along as well. I strongly recommend that you go and find our Car Smart guide, which you can access online. All of the details that you need to know are in that guide, and today we're going to go through some of those details, but then it's up to you to go and find out more. Today we're going to go through some scenarios, and they're going to end with yes or no questions. And these will help you think about what you need to know in terms of your best practice or about how the law will help you in certain circumstances. But before we do that, one of the most important things that we can do as consumers, especially when we're making major purchases, is ask the right questions. So let's talk about those. The first question is, of course, what are the pros and cons of buying that first car? Now, a pro and a con can be anything, and they're going to be different from person to person, so think about your circumstances. The pros can, of course, be practical things like being able to get from A to B without having to wait for that bus schedule, without having to impose on mum and dad's taxi service. Pros can also be things like the social factor. How cool is it to have your first car? How much easier is it going to be to get a job? So the cons might be things to do with the budget and the price of the car. There might be things to do with the responsibility of owning and maintaining that car. And there might be things to do with the safety aspects of driving that car. All of these things are really important because they are going to inform the choices that you make. Now this leads us neatly into our second question. How will my options fit with my lifestyle and budget? Now some of these lifestyle questions are going to be really important, not just the budget one. A lifestyle question might be, what am I actually going to use this car for? Are you just going to be driving it in town from A to B just to get from home to work or from home to school? Are you going to be taking it up to the coast every weekend so that you can go surfing? Are you studying a trade and will need to use a vehicle that can support you with that trade? Maybe you'll need to go and buy a ute. Those are going to be really important questions. Now these are going to have to be tempered, of course, by your budget questions. What can you actually afford? Are you going to need to get a car loan? Can you afford to buy a car outright? How much can you afford to outlay? These are really important questions, but they lead us neatly into question 3 because it's not just the immediate costs that we need to think about. We also need to think about our ongoing costs as well, and we need to budget for those. So our ongoing costs might be things like maintenance, fuel, absolutely, even changing your tires every year or so. All of these options are going to have to come into it when we start thinking about what car we can afford. And then once we have a better idea of that budget, we can start assessing our options. And that's question 4. Who can I buy from and what do these options mean? Now, we can choose to buy new or buy used, and those are going to have different impacts on our budget. But even if we do decide, as most of us will, to go for the used car option first, then there are still lots of options there. Do we buy from a dealer or do we buy privately? If we are buying privately, are we going to buy from a friend or neighbor, from a family member? Or are we going to buy from somebody that we've never met, maybe through an online car listing? All of those are going to have different things that we need to think about and different risk levels that we're going to need to assess. But that's one of the things that we're going to talk through today. This leads, of course, to our final question. How do I minimize the risks of my purchase and resolve any issues if they happen? Now, if you do pay attention to today's seminar, you'll get lots of hints and tips about how you can minimize the risks, the things that you can think about ahead of time. And the more you think about ahead of time, the more you answer those questions that we've just gone through, the fewer risks you're going to have. One of the things that you can choose as your option, if you are buying a used car, is to go and buy a used car from a dealer. And this can be a really good option for you to take because it comes with a lot of protections for you as a consumer. Anybody who sells used vehicles as their business in Queensland must hold a motor dealer's license. And these are actually issued by the Office of Fair Trading. One of the things that you can do ahead of time before you buy from a motor dealer is make sure that they are actually licensed, and this gives you the peace of mind that they are going to follow all of the rules that they need to follow and that they're going to be a legitimate trader. So how do you actually do that? Well, one of the things that you can do quickly and simply is jump onto the Office of Fair Trading's website, which is www.qld.gov.au/fair-trading. And on our website there, in that corner, you will see a link that says check a license. Click on that link and this page will come up. Our check a license page goes through all of the licenses in a range of industries that the OFT licenses, including motor dealers. And if you're buying at auction, it also includes a category called chattel auctioneers. Now that license allows people to sell things at auction, anything that is not real estate, and that includes vehicles. You can run a search either by the person's name or their company's name or a license number if they've given it to you. And if you get a positive result on that search, then that guarantees to you that A, that person is licensed, and B, that their license is up to date. That's a really good guarantee that you're dealing with a legitimate business. And this is Toshiko's story. Toshiko's neighbor Bill is selling his car, and Toshiko is interested. She takes it for a test drive and thinks it could suit her needs. Bill gives Toshiko the following paperwork at her request. So what we've got is the safety certificate paperwork. And you might know this as a roadworthy. Is that all the research that Toshiko needs? Now, of course, Toshiko needs to do a lot of research herself, especially when she's buying privately. A lot of the things that a motor dealer would be expected to do if you were buying from a business actually become the responsibility of the buyer if you are buying in a private transaction from an individual. So when you are buying a car privately, you should always check the registration, the odometer, the vehicle identification number or VIN, the logbook, date plates and more. So these details will tell you things like, is the car registered and how does the registration transfer actually work? Is it going to be transferred into your name? The odometer tells you how far the car is driven. The more kilometers that the car is driven, there's going to be more things to think about in terms of buying that car. The vehicle identification number, or VIN, identifies the car specifically as this particular make and model of that car. It's a far more accurate way to track an individual car than a registration plate, which can sometimes change over time. Now the logbook will look at how often the car's been serviced, and if there's anything missing in that logbook, or if it doesn't look like it's had a service in a substantial amount of time, that might be something to raise as a question. Now the date plates, there's two dates that are going to be stamped on that car. The first one is the build date, which is the date that the car was manufactured. It may be different from the year that it was sold. So double check on that one to make sure that you know exactly when it was manufactured. And then there's the compliance date, and that date is when this car passed the Australian safety standards. Being able to see all of these details will give you a fuller picture about the history of that car, and that's important to know. The second thing, book an inspection with an independent qualified mechanic. Independent qualified mechanic should always be given the chance to look at that car before you finalize the sale. This will help you know if there are any mechanical issues with the car before you agree to buy it. The other thing that Toshiko can do is she can ask her local police to do a stolen vehicle history search to make sure that the car wasn't stolen. There are some other checks that she can do as well, and we'll talk a bit about those as we go through today. If you are buying privately, you have to take a lot of responsibility for doing these checks. They will help minimize the risks down the line. Let's move on to our next example, and that is Hannah. Hannah is looking to buy a car, so she and her mum find a used car for $8,000 at a local car yard. They sign a contract and agree that they will collect the car next week. But as they drive home, they see at a different car yard another car, similar make and model, but almost $1,500 cheaper. This looks like a much better deal. My question to you, can Hannah back out of the contract that she's already signed? Now, a contract is a contract, right? Everybody knows that. But in this case, my answer to you is actually yes. because there are special rules and protections that will apply if you are buying a used car from a motor dealer, and one of these is something called a cooling off period. A cooling off period of 1 business day applies to a used car transaction if you buy that car from a licensed motor dealer, if the dealer is not selling that car on behalf of another person, which is what we call a consignment sale. Most of the time, when you buy a car from a used car lot, the dealer has actually already purchased that vehicle from its previous owner. They are now legally the owner of that car, and if that's the case, they must offer that cooling off period. And the third thing, you must not take the car off the lot. So if Hannah had decided that she's so excited about buying this car that she drives it home, she forfeits her cooling off period. Now there are some exceptions to this. Hannah can of course take that car for a test drive. That won't cancel out the cooling off period, and nor will it cancel out the cooling off period if she takes that car to her local independent qualified mechanic, so that that mechanic can have a look at the car and give her a detailed mechanical report. But for any other reason, if Hannah leaves the car yard with the car, then she is deemed to have finalised the sale. The car yard cannot back out of the contract using the cooling off period, only the consumer can. The cooling off period expires at 5 p.m. on the business day after you sign the contract, except if the business closes before 5 p.m. on that day. If that's the case, then the cooling off period is extended until the business closes the day after that. In that time, if Hannah did choose to back out of the purchase, all she needs to do is communicate that intention to the business in writing. There's several ways that she can do this. She can send them an email. She can write them a letter and deliver it in person. She could write them a letter and send it by carrier pigeon, as long as it gets to that business by the closure of the cooling off period. She can even use the section provided in the paperwork that she signs with the car yard. However she chooses to do it, she must get that intention to use her cooling off period and back out of the sale to the business before the closure of the cooling off period. At that stage, the dealer must return any deposit that she's paid, except for a $100 fee that they are entitled to keep. But it may be better for Hannah to forfeit that $100 in order to buy the car that is $1,500 cheaper. It's entirely up to her. So let's move on to our next scenario. Now this is Angie's story. Now Angie has her eye on a new hatchback, but she's going to need to apply for a car loan to afford it. After Angie signs the contract and pays a $1,000 deposit, her loan application is denied. So my question to you is, can Angie cancel the purchase? Now, have a look at the details of the contract that Angie signed, particularly have a look at that final clause, because it's really relevant here. Now, as I'm sure you've decided, that clause that she's included in the contract mean that yes, she is entitled to cancel this purchase. She's included a subject to finance clause. Now, whenever you sign a contract on a car, or any major contract that you sign, you are entitled to make whatever changes that you would like to make, provided that the other party agrees to them. If that's the case, you'll need to both initial that contract to say you've both agreed to that amendment. They've got every right to agree or not agree with any change that you would like to make. If they don't want to agree to a change, you have every right not to continue and sign the contract. When you do sign that contract, make sure you include those specific clauses that you need, such as subject to finance clauses, or possibly if you've got a clause where you need a guaranteed date of delivery. Now, one of the things that Angie did was she specified in that subject to finance clause that it was contingent on her obtaining finance from her choice of credit provider. In her case, it was from Your Bank Pty Ltd. And she specifically wrote that into her contract so that she could have the power to choose which provider she used. If she had just used a generic statement that this contract is subject to the purchaser obtaining sufficient finance, well, most car yards will also have a car finance business that they're affiliated with, or maybe they have a car finance section of their own business. And if that business were to arrange for Angie to have finance through that business, in whatever terms they offer, that may still satisfy the terms of that generic contract. However, the terms of that finance arrangement may not suit Angie's circumstances. Angie has done her shopping around and chosen that particular credit provider because that is the best provider with the best terms and conditions for her circumstances. So she wants to ensure that that credit provider is the one that she is able to use. Some other things that you want to think about when you're signing the contract on a vehicle. Never sign an incomplete or blank contract. If you sign an incomplete or blank contract, then you've no guarantee that the details that are going to be written into that contract after you sign it are going to be the ones that you thought were going to be there. And of course, keep a copy of the contract so that you know what you signed, and if there's any dispute between yourself and the seller, then you've both got a copy of the contract to prove what you signed. So let's move on to Gabby's story. Gabby bought her first car from a licensed second-hand dealer about a month ago. And everything was going well with her car until one day she receives a letter in the post from our old friends at Your Bank Pty Ltd. So this is a repossession of vehicle notice, not because of anything Gabby's done, but because the former owner is in default of the car loan that they were paying off when they owned the vehicle. So now the bank wants to repossess that car. My question to you is in two parts. Firstly, can the bank do this? And secondly, can Gabby do something about it? I have good news and bad news for Gabby. The bad news is, yes, the bank can do this. The contract they signed with the former owner to provide them the finance used that car as security. What that means is that if the owner stopped paying the car loan, as they've done, that the ownership of that car would transfer to the bank. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't change just because Gabby now owns the car. The good news for Gabby, though, is she can do something about it. Now, first of all, she's bought this vehicle from a motor dealer. One of the rules that applies to motor dealers is that they must check before they sell a vehicle to make sure that it does not have any loan or security attached to it. And if it does, they are not allowed to sell that vehicle. So in this case, that motor dealer has broken the law. But if that does happen, Gabby can still demand a remedy, such as getting her money back. Now, if Gabby was buying from a private seller, the rules are slightly different. A private seller is allowed to sell a vehicle if it does have loans and securities attached to it, providing that they are upfront and do not hide or refuse to disclose that information. What Gabby should do in either case is double check this information for herself. One of the things that she can do is visit the PPSR, the Personal Property Securities Register. And this is a service provided by the Australian government, and it's an online listing of every item that has a loan or security attached to it. And in the bulk, this applies with vehicles. There are private businesses that will do similar searches, but a PPSR search will give you the basic information that you need. You go to the PPSR website of ppsr.gov.au, and in the middle of that homepage there is a quick vehicle search. Gabby can do that search for $2, and it will come back with all kinds of information that will be relevant to her. Not only whether or not there was a loan or security attached to the vehicle, but also whether or not it has ever appeared in a written off register. So if a vehicle's ever been written off because it's been in a crash or a flood, then that will be on record, and that will be something that will be relevant to Gabby if she wants to buy that car. It will also tell her if that vehicle is impacted by the current recall of vehicles with defective Takata airbags. Now, regardless of whether she's buying from a dealer or buying privately, it's really, really useful for her to do that check for herself so she is confident. A motor dealer will have to provide her with some of that paperwork to demonstrate that they have done that search themselves. But if it is a private seller, Gabby is absolutely responsible for doing those checks. Okay, let's move on to Jonah's story. Now, 6 weeks ago, Jonah bought a 2011 model car from a dealer and has only driven it for about 140 kilometers since. Now, this morning the car didn't start. A mechanic came to look at the car and they made this report. So as you can see, there's damage to the spark plugs and there's general wear and tear to the engine itself. And both of these issues are contributing to the fact that the car doesn't start. Now, my question to you, can Jonah take action against the dealer? Now, the good news for Jonah is that because he has bought from a dealer, he is entitled to a statutory warranty. Now, a statutory warranty applies to any vehicle bought from a motor dealer with some exceptions. The exceptions include whether it is unable to be registered or is on the written off register. And if Jonah was only buying it for parts, the statutory warranty would not apply to that. A statutory warranty does not apply to things like motorbikes, commercial vehicles, caravans, and it also doesn't apply to sales by consignment, which is where the dealer is selling on behalf of another person. That's a lot of information to remember, but think of it this way. A statutory warranty will apply to any used vehicle unless it is made clear to you that the statutory warranty does not apply, and that's the responsibility of the seller. For instance, they can put a sign on the windscreen of the car, on a stand next to the car, to state that this does not have a statutory warranty. If their yard only sells by consignment, they might put something at the entrance to their property to say no statutory warranty applies to any of these vehicles. Either way, they have to be clear to you before you even consider buying that car that this will not have a statutory warranty. In any other case, there is a statutory warranty that will apply. And one of two warranties will apply. There's a Class A and a Class B. Now, a Class A warranty applies to vehicles that are both under 10 years old, judged by the build date, and have driven under 160,000 kilometers on the odometer. Now, in Jonah's situation, we are looking at a Class A warranty. For a Class A warranty, the statutory warranty lasts for either 3 months or for the first 5,000 kilometers that he drives. He's absolutely within that time. If it was a Class B warranty, then that warranty would only last for 1 month or the first 1,000 kilometers. Now, there's a process to go through with statutory warranty. You can't just get the repairs done and then expect to be reimbursed. There are also things that are exempted from statutory warranty. Things like your windscreen wipers or your audio system, they're not covered. A full list of what is and isn't covered, how to apply for a statutory warranty, and how these rules are applied can be found in that Car Smart guide or by jumping onto our website. So Jonah's going to have to go through a process to apply for a statutory warranty, but he is absolutely entitled to one. Okay, so that's the end of all of our scenarios. Just before we finish up, it's really helpful for us to think about what should we do in case something does go wrong. So here's a bit of a process that we can think through in terms of how do we get a problem resolved. Now, the first step is to be specific with yourself about what is actually the issue. Work out what the issue is, be exact, and work out for yourself how you want it resolved. Know what the problem is, know how you want it fixed. Once you've done that, contact the seller, have a discussion with them, whether in writing or over the phone or in person, about how you'd like to proceed from here. 9 times out of 10, if you're a reasonable person and they're being reasonable, you'll come to a resolution between you and nobody else will have to get involved. If they won't help, you may have to look at taking formal action. There's a couple of ways that you can do this. If your motor dealer is a member of an industry association, such as the MTAQ, the Motor Trades Association of Queensland, you can go through their process to make a complaint through them. Or, if you're dealing with a licensed motor dealer or a licensed chattel auctioneer, you can lodge a formal complaint through the Office of Fair Trading, and you can do that by clicking onto our website. As I said, make sure you're really clear and specific about what the issue is, how you want that problem resolved, and as you go through those steps, keep notes. Who did you talk to? What was their name? What did they say? Keep all of your receipts, keep all of the emails, because if you do need to lodge that formal complaint, having all of that paperwork that you can attach to your complaint is going to make it easier to look at that and process through the issues. If you do want to find out some more details, especially with some of these complex areas of the law, such as statutory warranties and cooling off periods, I strongly urge you to go and download a copy of CarSmart or jump onto our website and find the Buying a Car section. You'll be able to get all of the details about what is or isn't covered as part of those rules. It's important to be really, really clear about these rules because they are quite detailed. Thank you very much, guys, for participating in today's online video presentation. I hope you've learned something interesting. If you do have somebody that you're working alongside, take this opportunity to have a bit of a chat with them about some of the things that you've learned, some of the things that you didn't know. If this is something that has inspired you, you might like to think about doing a BuySmart competition entry on the topic of buying a car. Now, the BuySmart competition is something that we run at the Office of Fair Trading every year for students between years 4 and 12 to learn more about a consumer or financial issue. You can win a share of over $15,000 in prize money, and you can have a lot of fun along the way. Jump over to the BuySmart website to find out more. Now, for those of you who are going out there now to buy your first car, all the best.